Guys, welcome back and thank you so much for giving me such positive feedback on episode one of my podcast. And today I am, of course, jumping into my second episode, which has been polled on my Instagram. And the key thing that people wanted me to discuss today was how important is consistency, not just to your business, but to your day-to-day job, to your life, and your well-being as well. So today I'm blessed actually to be able to collaborate with somebody who I've been following for quite some time on his journey. And I'm going to not explain too much about that because I'm going to let him jump in and explain exactly what it is that he does. But just to give you a quick brief, this gentleman is somebody who I've been following for the last 3 years at the very least. I've seen him do some pretty extraordinary things, which ties in with a lot of what I discussed about in my first episode last week. So, with that in mind, and now the topic this week being the consistency element to business, to your life, I wanted to bring in a good friend of mine, Richard Singh, who is a regional director in a company called ACN. Now, Richard was not a regional director 5 to 6 years ago. In fact, his life was very different. So, without further ado, I'm just going to bring in Richard.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, so just to kind of introduce myself so everyone knows, who I am. My name's Richard Singh. I actually come from a single parent family of six, so me being the eldest. And I actually went on to study social work at university, but I actually ended up in retail. From working in retail, I worked within the telecoms industry. And unfortunately, the company that I was working for, it collapsed. I then had a look at an opportunity, and over the last 6 years, I've been able to sort of build a global business, and I've been able to kind of really develop and sort of learn a bit more about me. I think one of the things that I wasn't too confident with letting people know is what I actually believed in, what I loved, what I wanted to do, and I'm excited for what's happening. And yeah, I just thought I'd come on and we could just have a chat and kind of take things from there.
Definitely. And I mean, like, Richard, some of the things you've done in your company ACN have been quite phenomenal. And I've been following your journey, like I said, for the last 3 years. So what prompted me to actually, kind of vibe with you today was the fact that I saw a lot of what I went through in the journey that you are kind of going through and have been through in many ways as well. And I'm sure we're kind of at a stage in our lives, yourself and me as well, that we're by no means are we the finished article, but we're kind of in this kind of small group who decided to make a change in our lives at some point, whether that was consciously or subconsciously, however it may well have been. I just wanted to ask you, how have you managed to stay so consistent over the years? Because one of the things I've learned in being in business is you've got to be consistent, and not just for one day or one week. You've got to be in it for the long run. You've got to be in it for as long as it may take, but you've got to find that consistency. Where did you find that consistency within yourself to go from, working in retail to now having a global business in 17 different countries?
Well, it's funny because when I think of what consistency means to me, I sometimes almost look at it as in what you love the most is normally the thing you do the most. And if you really strip that idea back and you think, well, if someone likes eating and they've got a general passion for food, they'd probably do it more consistently than someone that doesn't. And what I feel that ended up happening for me is that I wasn't really passionate about where I was going. I was sort of comfortable with where I was and I was enjoying, living a different life to the one I have now. but I never really had a passion about something moving forwards. And when I got involved in this business, I actually faced some of the biggest reality checks, in fact. I think I was more scared finding out who I actually was. Because in the actual real, I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. So
Mm.
I started to really look at, well, what is it that I actually want? And one of the things that I always like sharing with someone is, we always say that, what's your reason why? Why is it important you live your life the way you do? Like, why? But the way I've been now sort of made to look at it is that why actually stands for what hurts you.
Mm.
And if you can find out what hurts you, that ends up being the driver to you doing something. Because consistency, when you think about it, is just repeating an action over and over again. Like if you're going to butter your toast, you know that if you only spread it once, you might not butter the whole thing. So if you consistently do it for long enough, it'll be done. So yeah, for me, I think the consistency came from I needed to fall in love with something. And
Mm.
I had to really believe that within me, there was something that made me always want to do it. You always hear the term, you have to have a sickening work ethic. But the funny thing is that I think consistency ends up building that work ethic. I don't think it's the work ethic that sometimes keeps you consistent. So for me, like consistency really comes from, look, you've got to fall in love with whatever you're doing in whatever. And if you do, and you can just fall in love with the process without ever thinking about the end result, oh, you'll be probably one of the most consistent people in your entire lifetime.
100%, Richard. And it's funny you say that because there is a client I visit on a weekly basis, and in their office they have this illustration with the wordings, "Disciplined men make effective men."
Mm,
And I couldn't agree more with that because one of the things that I've found over the years is, starting out in business, we all start with big dreams, and those dreams never really leave us, to be honest. Whether we
mm,
quit, whether we don't, whether we're just struggling through, whatever it may well be, we're always going to have a dream. Even if we reach that dream, we're going to end up having another dream that we're trying to reach. And what I found over the years was that so many people actually squash their own dreams. They strangle their own dreams with their own hands. That's what they do over the years because
mm,
they set out with this vision in their head of how it's going to be. And it's never that way because no one ever lays that red carpet out for you. You're going to have to stitch every single bit of that red carpet for yourself until the point that you actually get there. And this is what I found, starting a business. I had this vision in my head. And after a year, it wasn't going even remotely in that direction at all. But what I've found
mm,
over the years, just by sort of keeping consistent, is that you start to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And you've got to just keep going at it. And the biggest thing is these days, like I said, people squash their own dreams with their own two hands. And then
mm,
they want to blame every other factor of their life except themselves as to why something didn't work. Now, not
mm,
everything in your life you're going to do is going to, prove fruitful. Even the most successful people try something and it sometimes doesn't work. But what
mm,
segregates them from the rest, surely, is just this consistent mindset, even in many ways, that they have
mm,
that maybe the rest, the 95% of the world doesn't. Um,
mm.
and I think that's what I found for myself, that doors of opportunity will always be open to you as long as you have the drive to keep banging on that door. Would you agree with any
Mm.
of that?
No, no, 100%. And no, I completely understand, what you mean. And it is true, I think. But because we never reward ourselves on our losses, it's why we struggle to open up to the idea that, look, falling in love with the process is so more exciting than what the finish line looks like. because
Mm.
along the way, you are going to learn some things about yourself that you didn't know. You know, one of the things that I sort of relate back to with myself is that when I was, trying to move forwards in my business and I just kind of kept failing, it really made me think that, maybe I shouldn't keep doing it right now because right now it's hurting. And I think one of the real messages that I like really want to get across to people is that, look, failing forwards and failing more and more is actually probably one of the most beautiful things you'll do in your life, because what it will allow you to do is that becoming consistent just becomes habitual. It's a behavior that's so deeply inside you. You'll just keep moving and growing and you'll just get better at it. And I feel like
Mm.
it's just I just feel like people don't know. And I don't know about you, Summit, and in terms of, when you spoke to people about why they're not consistent, what kind of things have they sort of said?
I think sometimes, well, majority of times, I think people are not willing to accept feedback, constructive feedback, because they see it
Mm,
as just being criticism.
mm,
Um, Others are insecure within themselves and go on the defensive. So I think, I don't think I've ever really gone up to someone and said, you're not consistent in that sort of sense. But, I discuss with people who seem to be struggling with aspects of their life, and the common factor actually tends to be that they are their own biggest problem. Um, it's
mm.
not very often that, factors outside your control, they should not be penetrating that circle where you have control. And I
Yeah.
think that's where people I've been in that situation myself, Richard, where, I've allowed factors that I cannot control to bring me down. And, that sounds extraordinary because it's not even in my control how that's going to work out. So why am I bringing that into my energy? And I think that's what I found over sort of the years, is that people struggle with three things. They struggle with their own demons. They struggle with constructive criticism. And the third biggest, and in my opinion, the biggest, is the fact that they struggle with the fact that you were once in their shoes and you no longer are in those shoes any longer. And that, I think, is two ways to look at that. Because if I met somebody who was, on my level and I was on their level, and then all of a sudden they now have taken a game to a completely different level, I would be chomping at the bits to learn from that person. Because I might not necessarily be able to take everything he or she has done to get to that level, but I can
Mm,
definitely impart,
yeah.
some of that knowledge. I can definitely implement that into my life, into my daily routine. And that's what learning's about. Learning is definitely, you never stop learning. And you read this in so many books and so many articles, you never stop learning. And the moment you do stop learning, is that's when things stop working for you. If you look at some of the most successful people, the reason they keep opening up new ventures is because they have always continuously stayed not just consistent, but they've consistently kept learning. And the fact
Mm,
that they were willing and open-minded to, take on board thoughts and ideas and opinions of people was the reason they were able to open up, another section or another sector or a business or another branch, whatever it may well be. And I think that's
mm,
where in today's generation we're letting ourselves down, because everybody's ego, their pride, it doesn't allow them, you know, to think in some ways, because you bog yourself down with such negativity on a consistent basis that you don't even give yourself the opportunity to build that self confidence. And that's what I've found with people, is that people are not open to that, because it kind of exposes all their insecurities in many ways. But instead of embracing that and actually, trying to better themselves, I find some individuals, I won't say all, some individuals, um, have so much potential, but they lose that potential within themselves because they are just not willing to learn.
Mm.
And I mean, you yourself, obviously being in the field you are, Richard, would probably know that best because you come across hundreds of people every single day, thousands in a year, whatever it may well be, and you must see that quite consistently yourself.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that it actually comes down to one principle. And the principle is that, what's your coachability index? Which basically means how coachable actually are you? Because when you think about every single individual, they can all be given the same chance, the same opportunity at even the same time. But what separates them isn't about how skilled they are, how smart they are, how determined they are. What it actually comes down to is how coachable are they? And what you'll notice with some of the most successful leaders in the world today, they were all readers. The one thing that they were able to do was consume knowledge, rule the world. They also were very heavy readers, where most of them, in fact, they actually wrote books. So it's quite crazy that you say that, because I honestly believe that it just purely comes down to how coachable you are. And, they always say, you have to be willing to be able to adapt. If you can't change with the times, then unfortunately you'll get left behind. And, that's something that I kind of, strongly believe in. But yeah, it's like when it comes to, being coachable.
Mm. And how what would you say the biggest problem you see in society today? And let's stick to a subsection. Let's stick to people who um, are in jobs respectfully, but they're unhappy with their careers. What do you think stops them from finding their dream job or opening up that cafe they wanted or that bakery they wanted, or opening up that multi-million pound business in their head that they have? What stops them from actually going out and attempting to do it?
I think it kind of stems down to fear. I think one of the scariest things about human beings is that we're actually the most adaptable, which means we sort of are able to do things at a higher level. We're able to grow, expand, and you've seen that, within the human race as over time we've evolved. So fear for me is something that's so important, because sometimes it can actually grow from the people that you surround yourself with. And it's something that's kind of been drummed into me from early on, is that dependent on the company that you keep and the environments that you like to be around, they normally stem a big part of your character.
Mm,
And when you think of some people that have been so successful, I've sometimes looked to them and thought, man, I wonder how scared they was when they started this, or how fearful of trying to do this they were. You look
yeah.
at Jeff Bezos starting in his garage and thinking he was actually sitting in a garage, like imagine four walls, garage door, and look at where it is today.
Mm,
And I feel like fear is what really holds people back, because I actually believe most of us, we play ourselves short. We really do.
mm,
And the reason why I say that is because Roger Bannister did it the best. He ran, the 4 minute mile, uh, and it was funny because up until that time, no one had ever beaten the record. But after he broke it, several people, and people still today are beating that record. So it
Mm.
does show that we are all capable. It will just come down to the fear of, what happens if it doesn't work? I'm scared of this. Like, it's just so funny. I feel like a lot of us just sit on the idea of that. I just don't want to lose, and I don't want people to know I lose. And I don't know whether that's social media over time, or people's, they're looking at things and things have got easier, but I do see it being a problem later down the line.
Most definitely. I think, now more than ever, I mean, I discussed this in my last podcast that, with all the surroundings around us now, with all the issues that we've had due to COVID and the way the economy is now, and it's extraordinary how more than 90% of the people are looking at it as a doom and gloom. And, I'm one of the few optimists who are looking at it as a massive opportunity. It's a
Yeah.
huge opportunity for people to step out of that comfort zone and make something happen. With every crisis comes a great opportunity, and I really
Yeah.
do genuinely believe that opportunity is now. Now, these opportunities do not come every day. Now, one thing, Richard, you'd agree with me as well, is sometimes it really is about seizing the initiative at the right time.
Mm.
But if you're going to be a closed book, you're never going to see that opening. It's like having your back to a football match and trying to guess which player has the ball. It just wouldn't work. So similarly, you've got to be open to change for change to come about.
Yeah.
And this was the biggest lesson that I learned going into business at the age of 22. Um, was that the materialistic things that we set out for become irrelevant over a change of time, because not because we grow above them. It's just our thinking surpasses materialistic things. Our thinking becomes bigger than that, and that's
Yeah.
when you're in it for the long run, because you're no longer just out there to make a quick buck to buy yourself a Mercedes or a BMW, whatever it may well
Yeah.
be. You're thinking the bigger picture, and along the way, things that were very sentimental to me when I was younger, 22, 23, are no longer relevant. I no longer
Mm.
care about, the designer suits. I no longer
Mm.
care about how expensive my shoes are, what kind of watch I'm wearing.
If you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
when did that change for you? So, like, during your journey on your way up, of course, there are some materialistic desires that we may have, and
Mm.
just some little things that we may have looked at and gone, I don't mind gifting myself something because I've kind of worked hard and stuff. When
Yeah.
did it change for you where you really just thought, you know what, all the materialistic things that are around me, they're just not what they set out to be? When did it change for you?
To be quite honest with you, Richard, it, in my opinion, for me, it took me about 5 years. And it was only after I had got to the 5th year of my company that it hit me that I've gone past that stage where most companies fail, which is
Yeah.
within the first 5 years.
Yep.
And I sat down and I looked at it. And I looked at all the things around me that, that had been achieved in the company. And I looked at that and I really appreciated the fact that I had already come a long way from where I was 5 years ago. And that all
Mm.
of a sudden for me became the most important thing, was I want to now see where I'm going to be in the next 5 years. And it was no longer about, I want to see what house I live in or what car I drive in the next 5 years or how expensive my shoes are going to be the next 5 years. That wasn't even crossing my mind. And it was only when I realized that I cannot base my life on other people's success stories.
Mm.
I had to come to terms with that. I couldn't be X, Y, and Z. I'm my own person. I'm Sumit Anand, and I have to live my own life, and I have to create my own legacy along the way. And
Mm.
one of the killers is people try to take the life of certain influencers, certain business people, and they forget that those people have done a lot of groundwork behind that. There's
Mm.
tons and tons of groundwork behind what they've done to get to where they are. So for you to expect to jump to that situation where they are, it isn't just silly, but it's very naive as well. So
Yeah.
when I came to that realization after 5 years, I came to know that that's when my why was bigger than just materials. I was out for something much bigger. And God's blessed me along the way. I
Mm.
cannot say there's anything I don't have today that I've ever wanted. So along the way, God's been generous enough, to gift me that without me even, you know, craving it or asking, for these
Mm.
materialistic things. I've been fortunate enough to live a good life. I've been fortunate enough to travel the world. I've been fortunate enough to, drive the cars that I wanted to. I've been fortunate enough to meet the people that I met on my journey. But I would never have been able to do that if my focus was just that, if you know what I mean. If my
Yeah.
focus was just to get those things, just to, I probably would have gone down under a long time ago. But the fact that my vision was far beyond that, that allows so many things to come your way along the way that you won't even be aware. You'll be surprised what comes your way. And I'm sure you've experienced that to an element as well.
Yeah.
Things that you probably have today,
Yeah.
you only dreamt about at some stage.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that I did want to just touch upon is that just well done for passing the 5 year mark. I think that's actually something that isn't sort of celebrated enough. And if we go back to the idea of consistency, it's about playing the long game. And I feel like people today, they don't know how to go past 5 years. People are even struggling to go past 5 years in a relationship. And you wonder, well, why is that? And I feel like a lot of us were not celebrating those that have been trying something for long enough. So obviously, I just wanted to give it back to yourself in terms of passing that 5 year mark, because I know what that feeling was like for me when I went past it. And I thought, wow, I'm actually gone past the first 5 years where 95% of businesses, they don't even last. And I
Amazing.
feel like that's a big part to the consistency, is that you got to play the long game. You got to be in, and you've got to be thinking legacy. You got to be thinking past your life, and you got to start thinking, well, if I can give something where when I leave and I've left behind whatever I have for others to benefit from, I think that's when you can really start getting excited about your sort of journey. So yeah, man, that 5 year mark, that's big. And anyone that ever gets past 5 years doing anything should really celebrate that, because I feel that's like a major key when it comes to consistency.
100%. And I mean, you obviously, like I said earlier, you deal with so many people due to the nature of your work. Um, what do you look for in a person before they become part of your organization?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what sort of people are you looking
Mm,
for?
yeah.
Who does Richard want to work with?
Yeah. Now, it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I first started my business, I didn't even know what I was looking for, because obviously you enter something you've never done before. You're not too sure exactly what it's going to take from yourself to make something work. And then you start looking at others and just kind of going, well, I don't know if it's going to work for me yet. So I might as well just speak to everyone. And I think over the years, the one thing that I've really got good with is my gut instinct about, do I believe this person is hurting? Now, when I mean hurting, I don't mean in terms of, oh, they're hurting emotionally, or they're mentally, having, demons and they're fighting. What I mean by hurting is there's something inside them that is wanting them to change something. And all I've got to do is identify that what it is, and try and see if I can find a solution for it. So one of the things that I would say that really matters the most is that you've got to be hurting enough to want to make change. Because otherwise you'll just end up kind of convincing yourself that what you're doing right now is enough, and that when the time is right, you'll make a decision then. And what you realize with most people is that that time never actually ends up happening. And I've seen it in my business in terms of meeting people after 4, 5, 6 years. And, unfortunately, they've not been able to get off what they wanted to, and they're still working on it. And, I'm still sort of, pushing and celebrating those that are still